Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. I'm in Dalian at the 2026 Summer Davos. The forum is coming to a close today. Innovation-driven development is the key to China's long-term economic resilience and steady growth. On the sidelines of the forum, I sat down with Professor Graham Allison from Harvard University to talk about China's innovation and also the China-US relations. Great to see you in Summer Davos.
My pleasure to see you again.
Well, as you heard the speech coming from a Chinese premier talking about China has been working on its innovation with tremendous efforts. How do those experiences speak to you?
China has put its emphasis on innovating in a way that will be translated into products and that will be better for China and better for the world. And I thought particularly in his appreciation of the role of the private sector as the driver of this was interesting.
Now, Professor, as a strategist, as a political scientist, can China be also an opportunity 2.0 for the United States?
Well, I think it's a good question, and the answer is yes, but it's often a double-edged item.
So, talking about China and the United States, since the two presidents met earlier, we have seen interactions between the two sides. However, over the past few weeks, we do see a rising phenomenon of trade disputes related to export control. So how do you see the latest phenomenon? What does that say to the true nature of trade relations and economic relations between the two sides?
So it's complicated, the answer, but there are two things going on simultaneously. So on the one hand, the China rapidly rising power, seriously threatening the U.S. position at the top of every pecking order, the colossal ruling power. So on the one hand, we have the fiercest Thucydidean rivalry of all time. So in a single generation, a country that was not visible in the rearview mirror of the U.S., in a single generation is now not visible in the rearview mirror because it's beside you or ahead of you. Who's the number one manufacturing country in the world? China. Who's the number one trading partner? China. Who's the one advanced manufacturing? China. The U.S. and China, as President Xi and Trump recognize, live on a small planet, as President Xi said. And on that small planet, they are so inextricably entangled that each of their very survival as a country depends on a degree of cooperation with the other. So they have both great nuclear arsenals, superpower nuclear arsenals. If they were to have a war, both everything here at Dalian and everything in Boston disappears. They live on a small planet that has with one biosphere. So greenhouse gases impact everybody. They have a financial and economic institutions that are so entangled. So they're going to be managing this struggle back and forth. On the one hand, here we had the summit just a month ago. They declared that no longer would they let great power competition be the only story. They tried to reshape the relationship
strategic stability,
constructive strategic stability. That's a vision, or pointer, or direction. So we're trying to build that. Now, building that requires straddling these two impulses. So on the one hand, we're working to cooperate. On the other hand, our governments, seeing where the rivalry creates pain, each take actions that can be interpreted by the other as hostile. And the difficulty of both President Xi and President Trump keeping control of the whole enterprises is very, very, but if I look at the balance of things, I think that you would be shocked if you read what President Trump's statement last week about China and about Xi Jinping. It was called an encomium to China. He said, I love China. I love Xi Jinping. He's the great leader in the world. Here's what I admire. Is this what Trump thinks? Absolutely, it is what he thinks. Now, does that mean that if we watch all of the behaviors of the U.S. government and the American society, you won't see lots of pushback that you would naturally expect in the Thucydidean rivalry? But the challenge that both President Xi and President Trump recognize is their job is to try to manage and limit the damage from that activity and then channel it into areas where their cooperation actually creates great win-win benefits for both of them. So this is going to be it's going to be rocky, it's going to be fragile, it's going to be unstable, it'll lurch sometimes one direction rather than the other, which again emphasizes why it's so important that the two leaders be able to communicate with each other and have a rapport and a sense of, as Trump said at the end of the summit, he said, we have a relationship now where if something comes up, a problem, we can just pick up the phone and talk to each other. Well, excuse me, how good is that as compared to letting people imagine how terrible it would be and then interpreting it and misinterpreting it? So I would say, my one-word summary, the relationship is improving and it's on a path of improvement.
How much do you think the message has to be strong enough from the White House, from the President Trump, so that his apparatus of enterprise, as you said, using that word, would understand 100% and also be able to implement it into actions?
The Trump administration does not have it doesn't operate in an orderly fashion the way previous administrations have. So the president has his views. Everyone knows that they have to be in line with the president's views, so they can't go to the opposite direction. But the degree of control is quite different than in the Chinese system. About President Xi, it's sometimes said that he's not just the CEO, he's the COE, the chief of everything. So that system manages a degree of control in which it's very unlikely that somebody in the Commerce Department or in the Treasury under Halifon does something that's not consistent with the boss's view. In the American government, that happens every day. So the thing is much more chaotic, and that's much more difficult to manage. And the Trump administration has not done a good job of creating structures that manage very well. In the economic arena, in the U.S.-China relationship, fortunately, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, and his team have pretty much control of the part that they're dealing with. And similarly, his counterpart, He, has pretty good control. So that part is working. But if I look and see what happens in the Defense Department or what happens in the Commerce Department or what happens in the Congress, that's a whole other story.
Is Taiwan question still as dangerous a one as it used to be before the two presidents met?
I would say that one of the positive takeaways from the summit and also from the relationship that the two have been building over, and I think they've come to a degree of understanding of each other, that they're not going to allow this third party to be the provocation that could drag them into a war that they don't want.
You used to say recently, I remember at the Winter Davos, suggesting it's not destined to war as the title, part of your title of the book. Yes, right. But rather destined for peace for the year 2026.
Well, I would say 2026 may turn out in history to be the year, and I think if President Xi and President Trump are successful, they would like to have it said that in 2026, the U.S. and China became seriously reframing or redefining the relationship in order to recognize that there's two simultaneous impulses, to compete and to cooperate, and that we have to do both at the same time. And that's difficult, but life is difficult.
Leading up to the rest of the year, there are a lot of things going on, including the APEC, the G20 summit. Professor, how do you see the preparations leading up to these events to make sure these can be successful and the world can be more assured about China-US on a strategic stability path as both two wished?
So what President Xi and President Trump did at the Beijing summit was to provide not a blueprint of everything, just a pointer, as they said, a pointer to a constructive strategic stability. But now it's left to fill in what that actually means and how that works. And that's what we'll see over the period that people are preparing for right now, for the September meeting, and then for the two meetings that follow from that.
The rest of the year also with dramatic political agenda in the United States, including the midterm election. Now the two parties are competing, as we can see, fiercely right now. So, Professor, how do you see the domestic political landscape likely to have an impact on the bilateral agenda, and also how U.S. and China could work together on some of the critical areas that not only the two needs to work on together, but the rest of the world also expect?
In the midterm election, right now, President Trump is very unfavorable in the U.S. 2 people are opposed for every 1 person who supports it. So he's a low level of approval rating. The enthusiasm among Democrats, as shown in the primaries relative to Republicans, is much greater. So if the election were held today, the Democrats would clearly have a strong majority in the House of Representatives and may even come close to winning the Senate. That's what happened today. Now that's 150 days away, and in politics, that's a lifetime. So many things can happen in between. But if it turns out that in the midterm the Democrats take the House, then the next period ahead will be a big struggle between Congress, particularly with the House, and the President. And this will create a lot of waves for everything, including for U.S.-Chinese relations. The President will have less leeway than he has now. On the other hand, I think that his determination, his views about President Xi and about China are very rooted. His determination to try to make a difference in this area is real. So I would say it's a pretty good bet that the momentum will continue in a similar direction. And in the midterms, the issues between Republicans and Democrats in the election are not about China. This is all about affordability, about inflation, about the price of gas, about the war in Iran. You don't have anybody campaigning China as the problem.
Moving on to the issue of AI. As we know, the 2 largest innovation powers in the world, China and United States, on the artificial intelligence. How do you see behind the surface what is the nature of AI technological development and application development between these 2 economies?
First thing to remember about AI is that nobody knows. So the people who I follow who work on the frontier of this, every month or 2 or 3 are shocked that things went faster and further than they could have imagined 3 months before. So this chance that somebody like I can keep up, forget about it. It's just be amazed, be amazed, be amazed, be amazed. So what this is going to be and where does it end in, nobody knows. I mean, Henry Kissinger, when he tried to think about this, kept saying, this is going to be, this thing is going to be smarter, than all human beings. And maybe it's even not going to be very interested in us. Maybe smarter than, maybe like iRobot. So that if you go back into sci-fi, to Asimov, that's a good place to think, what could be possible? So who knows? Okay? Secondly, there are great benefits from AI, extreme, and you can see them all the time. Okay. But that next point, is it possible, even likely, that there will be negative applications of AI that'll have big harm for human beings? And the answer is yes. Is it possible that an AI could enable someone to create a bioweapon that would kill 1 million people? Yes. Well, wait a minute. So, and this thing should be developing just by companies out of control of any adult supervision from the government or from the society? I don't think so. But in the US, the companies are the king. They're developing as they are. Now there's a beginning to be a discussion of this. So Mythos became the occasion in which finally Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, said, when somebody explained to him how if this was used, you might even crash the whole financial system, he said, wait a minute, this is a problem. We have to see what we can do. So President Xi and President Trump talked about this.
Right.
There's now going to be a working group to begin to track
one,
yes.
AI governance discussion.
Well, I would say that's a good sign. It's late. I mean, excuse me, Henry and I wrote a piece in just 2 months before he died in 2023 saying we should be doing that now. So that was 2023. This is 2026. And so that's too late, but still not, fortunately, no catastrophic application has yet occurred. Maybe we're going to have to wait until after something terrible happens, and then people will say, oh my God, we should have done something. Fortunately, I think Xi and Trump talked about that, and they're now going to get started. So
would AI or some other common challenge be able to lead the two to really get into the start of a little bit more mutual trust?
I think the reality is the US and China are so inextricably entangled that they each require from the other a degree of cooperation for their own survival. So waking up to that is hard to do because I'm used to being completely independent. And now I find out you and I are inseparable conjoined Siamese twins. So however much you're looking at me saying, he's behaving ways I don't like, maybe I should strangle him. But then you think, if I strangle him, I'm committing suicide.
Yes.
I'm committing suicide. So I don't want to do that. So recognizing the threats to us. Now I recognize, and President Xi recognizes, President Trump recognizes, most people don't, the nuclear threat. We each have nuclear arsenals capable of completely erasing the other country from the map. After a nuclear war, there could be no living Chinese in China and no living Americans in America. Is that crazy? Crazy beyond belief. Right. But is it a fact? It's a fact. Okay? AI is another one that might motivate us now, particularly since it's a bright, shiny object, to say, hey, yikes, you and I need to do something about this, because otherwise, what could it do to both of us? Right. I would say that's another good, so I would say wherever motivation can come from, for the parties to recognize that they have a shared, necessary shared interest in cooperative behavior, each just for itself, not being nice to you, just for myself. That's what's required, is helpful. And I think that's why the more we can sort of look at this and think about it, the more this will be beneficial.
Professor, it's always been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for sharing, always.
Thank you for such good questions.
Tales of Chinese Children is a collection of fairy tales and fables written by Edith Eaton, one of the first Asian American women writers from the turn of the 20th century. Edith focused on children who were treasured.
They are the sweetest gift of all.
Lost.
Get away from me! Get away from me!
Or misunderstood.
My son, the evil spirit in your sister had almost lost you to me.
In the complicated adult world, and much more. Search for Books and Beyond on radio.cgtn.com and all major podcast platforms to delve into an audio journey which allows the sound to linger around and above you for stunning realism.
I come here every summer to feel the changes of the world in person. Instead of catching up, China is now on the front line of innovation and opening up. And the conversation taking place here are changing. And I am meeting those that you really don't want to miss. On AI, supply chains, innovation, and trade, to understand the world better in order to tell what's ahead for you. Join me in Dalian for AMNC 2026. China's pharmaceutical biotech sector is poised for sustained growth, driven by policy support, corporate R&D, and talent dividends. Here's my latest conversation with Eric Tse, CEO of Sino Biopharmaceutical. Eric, good to see you.
Good to see you again.
A lot of things going on at the Summer Davos. One of the things is about China innovation. Chinese Premier talk about China is others opportunity 2.0. What's your take?
So definitely I think it's like there's a lot of innovation in China going on right now. I think definitely is like what everyone is looking at is not only at the manufacturing capability of China right now, but particularly in that of development. So I think it's just like the world right now is looking in China to see is like how development is accelerating, right? So I think not only the speed, so time capital, but also on the cost. China in across industry is finding different ways to really accelerate the speed and the quality of delivery. So right now we see a lot of players from the globe. They're afraid of missing out on the, let's say, time capital, resource capital, on manufacture or on development in particular, to be a part of it. If not sourcing it by themselves, maybe find a local partner to participate and join. So I definitely think that with this capacity, the coming decade is a decade of partnership, whereas China will continuously to be very open to partner with anyone from the rest of the globe. So I think this is correct for all industries, so also including pharmaceutical.
Pharmaceutical industry, you are a player, very important player. Tell me more about how can China's pharmaceutical industry not only in delivering in services and also speed, but also the first class.
Okay, so in the topic of first in class, I believe a lot of times right now China is already stepping from a following position into bringing in novel discoveries. So right now we see there's already two branches in innovation. Number one is finding new modalities to speed up already discovery target to create a lot of best in class, right? The other one is actually when there's an early foundational discovery already happened in any of the early researches, then China moves super fast trying to find the target or the molecule or the modality to that can cope with the new discoveries. So the translational. So I think all these two parts are advanced a lot already in China. That already some of the targets. For example, one target that we did is CCR8 is the very first one globally. And then we really have to try to see is like what sector of oncology, which cancer type that it might has the most impact into. So I think all of these, China is bringing more and more novelty already to the pharmaceutical level. But what is even more important right now is over 40% of global clinical trials is already happening in China.
Right.
And then this is why for the past couple of years, MNCs have been, number one, sourcing more and more asset from China. Number two, actually to really maybe find a local partner to accelerate their clinical trial, because it's not only shorten their development time, but also lessen their development cost.
Right.
So in this aspect, I think what China can really bring in is in the future, maybe for phase 1, 2, shifting to entire China market, and then for phase 3, then participate global. So this will really fill unmet needs in the medical area, as well as to bring in innovative therapies to patients who need them in a more faster and less costly way.
To what degree, faster when you say?
I do think in terms of time, I would say conservatively at least 30%, maybe up to 50% of the time capital can be cut out. Right now for us, we're looking for global partners. What we can really achieve right now with our approval of IND and our first enrollment of patient into phase 3 trial, on average we can complete it in 24 months. So I think this is already a very breakthrough timing compared to like how fast global trial can be there. This is number one. Number two, I think, is on the cost, right? So in terms of costs, right now one new drug from the early discovery to NDA, it costs 2.6 billion USD. So this is an unbelievable number, and I believe it will continuously increase in the future. So with this cost, I think in China with a mass population, but not only the population, but with the talents really nurtured through the past decades, with the right practitioner, and also with the public health system that the Chinese government built. I think for all these criteria together, there's China clinical development. I think the status is kind of irreplaceable in the next decade at least. So with all of these plus, I think the costs will also decrease by at least 30% to maybe up to 50% as well.
There has been a lot of talk about whether global companies are in China or in China for the world. Where do you think the wind is blowing right now?
I have to emphasize, China is always part of the globe,
Yeah.
right? So when people talk about China innovation, it's also advancing global innovation. So when MNC said if it's in China or in China for global, I think definitely it's for both. Because MNCs are MNCs, they're aiming for global market, right? Whereas China is a significant market as well. So in both ways, I think developing in China means developing with the globe.
Great thought. On AI, there has been a lot of application of AI in the pharmaceutical industry. How much do you think at this moment it can really speed up the research and the clinical trial process? And to what degree the AI plus practice do you think is really workable?
Most of the speeding up is right now happening in the early discovery bits. Maybe before, let's say the PD-1 took up to dozens of years, right? But right now, like if it's happened all over again, it could speed up like by many years. So it really depends. If like finding the early quickest molecule, it can even happen in half a year, right? If not faster. In already existing modalities or therapies, it can even be even faster on improvements of the structure of a molecule, right? If slower, it might still take up a couple of years, but definitely faster than before. So I think this is already seen and already done, but the speeding up in clinical trials right now, I think it's still one of the challenges that we have to overcome.
And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. Thanks for being with me. Bye for now.